Very important, guys. Before we get off to a start here, I need to crack my beverage. I see that Jesse has what appears to be a giant big gulp. I am drinking Humans, an IPA for the people by the Parkside Brewery in Port Moody, British Columbia, Canada. That is my unpaid plug. If they hear this, I would very much like some money to get that made. But all of that aside, I'm Steve Kwan from Fighting Matters and BJJ Mental Models. I got my friends, Jesse Walker from Rough Hands BJJ in Louisville, Kentucky. Jesse, my friend, how's it going?
Hey, glad to be here.
I got my friend Stephan Kesting, fresh off yet another crazy Arctic expedition, still alive, which is always great to see, my friend. How are you doing?
Very well. It relaxed for the first time in quite a while.
Awesome. And we've got a first-timer to this feed, but a longtime co-collaborator of mine on BJJ Mental Models and other places. We've got the queen of Combat Arts Academy in Seattle, Washington. We've got Sonia Sillan. Sonia, how's it going?
It's wonderful. How are you, Steve?
I am doing great. Maybe we should do a quick introduction. I mean, I know that you are no stranger to people on my feed, but for those who don't know you, why don't you talk about yourself and also your gym and kind of what makes it unique in the culture? I think the cultural approach that you've taken at your gym is probably one of the things that is really stand out and kind of leads into the topic that I think we're going to get into here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a black belt under Hannet Stack. I briefly mentioned earlier, but I've been under 6 different affiliations and promoted by 5. So I've had my fair share of politics in Jiu-Jitsu. And
politics in Jiu-Jitsu? No.
No, oh my gosh.
I was told we're supposed to keep politics out of the sport. What do you mean there's politics in Jiu-Jitsu?
Oh my gosh, it's actually why I'm unaffiliated and I have a very open door policy. Like I actually coached one of my students in Vegas, and she was under a different team. So it wasn't my name, it was somebody else's, but I'm still there for her because I don't do politics. So on that note, a bit about the culture. I have been working pretty hard over the last few years to establish a culture of respect and mutual consideration. We have a ton of women that train. We actually have a separate intro program. And within that program, we talk about, I don't know, how to be a good partner, communication, rolling intensity, what is a submission and how to tap, what's a guard, how do we escape, how do we stay calm on bottom, and how to productively learn. And
Sorry,
so
when you say separate, do you mean separate male and female intro programs?
No, I'm sorry. No, it's just a separate program from the main classes because most gyms have their all levels class. We have one day where we have a ladies intro class and a ladies level 2, but that's supplementary to the full program. And so we have co-ed classes, but the intro program is specifically for beginners. Even if we have one beginner and let's say a couple higher belts jump in a class, it's still catered towards the brand new person. So we get the terminology, like I think my very first time learning how to shrimp, I had no idea what I was doing or why I was doing it. I didn't understand the line drill until maybe 8 months in.
I still don't understand the line drill.
I was going to say, I still...
We talk about our frames. We talk about what the kickstand is, how to get to the hip and quai, how to close off that space, and then how to create space to escape. So we get into every single little baby step. So as they move into the full program and start rolling, they can actually be a safe partner and learn at the same time instead of being a frantic starfish in full fight or flight. Yeah.
Frantic starfish, the most dangerous type of starfish for both the starfish and the person trying to spar with them, from my experience. But yeah, I thank you so much for coming by, Sonia. One of the things that I've always loved about your gym and your culture is not just that you try to make it a great place for people to train, but that you're pretty aggressive about trying to make it a great place for people to train. There's a lot of people I know who they have they believe the right thing. They're good people. They want to make a gym that helps people, but they're also kind of afraid to speak out here or there or to take a stand because they're worried, well, I don't want to alienate people or I don't want to stir the pot or cause any sort of drama or problem. And so the end result is you get a lot of people who say things like, Oh yeah, well this is, we don't mind having women training here or non-binary people training here, but we just don't want to make a big deal out of it. But something that you've always done is just very explicitly said, like, no, this is a home for you. This is a place for you. I mean, Molly, who's been on the podcast, right? A transgender black belt. She's one of yours, correct?
Yep. hmm
Yep.
She switched to our gym, I think, a little over a year ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I love that aspect of the culture that you have, just the willingness to speak out about things, knowing especially that it will probably result in some degree of blowback, at least in this sport. And that's an intro to the topic you wanted to discuss here. Now, we have many times on this podcast talked about some of the dark stuff that happens in and around jiu-jitsu. But the one thing that has always shocked me is that people just don't speak out. And you have a lot of thoughts on this. I know, why don't people speak out? So that's going to be the topic here today. I'll maybe turn it over to you to kind of give a broad introduction to the problem from your perspective.
Oh my gosh. Okay. This is a very, very broad topic.
Absolutely.
Generally
I'm turning it over to you
speaking,
because I
yeah.
want to take a few sips of this thing.
Perfect. I'm going to ramble on for a couple of minutes. You guys feel free to interrupt. But this topic in general is one of the ones where nobody talks about it. Like, why don't we speak up? Self-defense 101 isn't learning jujitsu. It's learning how to use your voice to say no, to say stop, right? So culturally, like a lot of women, we tend to grow up in environments where our voices get silenced, right? We don't speak up. Like, I come from a very Indian culture, um, where we had to hold our tongue. And even though our gut told us otherwise, we had to ignore that feeling. And oftentimes we get into gyms where something doesn't quite seem right. Like, maybe you see the bigger dude manhandling a smaller person, or even the smaller person trying to fully smash a big person. Um, that's just how they roll. That's the common phrase you get. That's just how they are. Like, you walk into a gym. I can't tell you guys how many gyms I've been to where either the women or the coach comes to me and they're like, hey, that's a great partner. That's a great, ooh, skip that guy. Definitely don't go with that person. They go too hard and that person heel hooks. Oh, but they're great over here. That shouldn't be a normal thing in a gym. So my goal, like when you walk into my gym, oh, hey, they're great. They're great. They're great. Yep. They're brand new, but they're really good at control if you just remind them to go lighter. Like, I want my 200+ pound men and women and everybody else in between to be able to roll with smaller people without trying to hurt them. And we see things like, oh gosh, the black belt who got jealous, who decides to hurt a student because they got so mad about something. Or, the coach that's spending time alone with a teenage girl, right? Like, that stuff gets so normalized and your gut tells you otherwise. You convince yourself that it's normal, it's fine, that nothing bad is happening. Maybe you see coach like picking on their kid. Maybe you see some signs of abuse from the gym owner's wife and the kids, but you don't say anything. Maybe, oh, I have a fun one. In Vegas, I was mat side with a coach who was straight up screaming at the ref. There was a bad points call. Like, I don't agree with it. It's a very bad call. And they were reviewing the video. And as they reviewed the match, this black belt just kept on screaming and screaming and screaming. And I'm sitting here like, what the heck? During the match, when the student made a wrong call, like, they, instead of coming up, they sat down to guard and sacrificed 2 points. The coach was visibly like, oh my gosh, like, why would she do that? Like, just visibly pissed off about it. But that's not a healthy place to be. And all of this ties back to people's emotional dysregulation and inability to know how to handle themselves around people, how to communicate, how to, like, be a good person.
I think it's made so much more difficult in the context of a strongly hierarchical environment, whether that's a church, whether that's a youth group, whether that's a martial arts gym, especially if you're coming in as a newbie, because all these people are killers. And if I say something, they're going to kill me. And the reality is they're probably not going to. And maybe it's just the way that this sport is, and maybe I just need to shut up about it. And I think certainly that's why I try to discourage, at least for me, the use of terms like professor or sifu or sensei or all these other honorifics, because it really does increase the hierarchy even further. And the odds of uh, that generating a culture of silence is higher. I think hierarchy has a lot to do with it. How do you begin to deconstruct that at your gym?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. We go by coach. I don't do professor. If you call me that a few times, I'm going to correct you because I mean, I did grow up in my first gym was Brazilian and there was a very specific like connotation with professor. It's the, I'm the student, I gotta be quiet, I can't say anything. Oh my gosh. Like you feel like you can't speak up, you can't ask for help. And so to me, we're just coach. Um, so I think to answer the question, let's actually take a step back. How do you guys feel about mat enforcement? You get the new white belt who's just crazy, and instead of, you know, oh my gosh, talking to the person, you just go hard because you watch them just go hard with the smaller person. That like I'm trying not to like specifically like say this person, that person, woman, man, but just when the new person decides to wreck somebody else, instead of saying, hey, that's not okay, or even speaking up in the middle of the role when somebody comes in and just proceeds to beat on this new person. How do you guys feel about that?
I'd love to hear Jesse's thoughts on this as a gym owner. Of course, I've kind of a leading question. I know what you're going to say, Jesse, because we've talked about this, but go for it.
Yeah. We don't, I don't tolerate it. We don't do it at our place. We actually have kind of, maybe even the opposite. We kind of have cultural enforcers. So a perfect example, we had a guy come into an open mat, maybe a month ago. Really no jiu-jitsu experience. One of my blue belts met the guy in the gym and they got to talking. He's like, hey, you should come out. There's an open mat. I don't know why I invited him to open mat, but, and immediately this guy, touches hands with one of my folks, who's on the smaller side, and immediately grabs his head and starts trying to rip his head off. And, my guy just tapped and it was fine. He's like, hey, look, we don't go that hard, and he actually, which I think is appropriate, he just ended the roll. He's like, I don't know that we could continue. But while I was watching it from the outside, I also kind of got reports later that he kept going through person to person to person. And each time he was getting culturally corrected, like, hey, we're not trying to kill each other here. There's no medals. There's, we're all in here trying to learn and do some skills development. And by the end, the guy had really settled down. And although he wasn't terribly skilled, it was a more effective calming down of not in a bad way, but an aggressive person, than I've ever seen any mat enforcement do unless they just injure them. I've never seen mat enforcing actually do what it purports to do.
I have seen it one time in 35 years, and it stands out because it was so unique. Most of the time, mat enforcement is really just building a culture of bullying at the school. But I've seen it work once in 35 years where a guy who used to hurt white belts had the mat enforcer come over and just pummel him horrendously. And afterwards, well, the guy disappeared for a couple of months, came back, nicest guy ever. So I would argue that any tactic that only works once in what is our collective experience here? I'll call it 100 years on the mats. Maybe it's happened another time. That's not a very good percentage strategy. It's better than total anarchy on the mats, right? If you just abrogate all responsibility and just let everyone do death roll 5,000, then you need mat enforcers. I would argue that the cultural coaching approach that you're talking about, Jesse, or the top-down approach where the instructor comes over and goes, hey, you want to keep on training here, here's some ground rules, is 100 times better than the mat enforcer.
Yeah. I have two issues with the mad enforcer thing. The first issue is, as you folks already brought up, it literally is just an example of perpetuating the cycle of violence, right? When you have a culture of mad enforcement, what you're implicitly saying is that this is part of the job. When you get to purple, brown, black belt, your job is to beat the bejesus out of people who aren't behaving. And that just conditions people so that in 5, 6, 7, 10 years, when they're in that role, they know to do the same. It's literally the same as how, abusive parents raise abusive children. It's just perpetuating the cycle of violence. That's one of my issues. The other is often the punishment doesn't match the crime. I mean, what you're basically proposing, if you endorse mad enforcement, is you're proposing that we should physically assault people when they don't behave the way that we want. That's by definition what we're doing. And we have to be realistic. Most people who come into jiu-jitsu and they're wild and crazy, it's not because they're mean or malicious or they want to hurt people. Yes, those people do exist. Like 1 out of 100 might come in and maybe there's some crazy narcissistic sociopath that just takes pleasure in hurting people. But those people are very rare. Most people are just like accountants and just regular people who simply have never done something like this in their life. And maybe they've watched action movies, and maybe they've seen UFC, and maybe they've watched pro wrestling, and they have no idea how easy it is for them to harm another person and how much harm that they can do, right? I mean, if you watch pro wrestling or if you watch UFC, you'd be under the impression that, I can just pick you up and slam you and spike you on your head and you're going to get right back up and you're still going to be in this. In the real world, you do that and you can dramatically alter the trajectory of someone's life, right? Especially if they're not a trained athlete. And so for a lot of the people who are overly aggressive on the mats, it's not that they're bad people. It's that they simply have, their context as to what combat looks like. It's trained them to be more intense than they should be. And on top of that, you factor in that they're probably scared for their life because this is the first time they've actually been in a fight. Now you got the adrenaline going and they're going to roll more intensely. They're going to behave in a way that is different from the way they would behave in day-to-day life. You don't fix that problem by beating the shit out of them.
100%. So that is the whole thing, because imagine if the coach just comes and tells you like, hey, like that white belt that kept hurting people. Oh, if this keeps happening and it's intentional, we can't roll anymore. Here's a consequence to your action. If in roles we hurt people and it keeps happening, that means we're not being a safe training partner. So you get to sit in timeout and not roll for the next 2 weeks. That's an enforceable consequence of somebody's shitty behavior. Right. So backtracking though, and the reason why I asked that question, if we just think about the actual beginner side of things, John Doe walks in on day 1, does an intro class or does a full class, because again, most gyms don't have an intro program. They don't get introduced. They get tossed into a class of people who don't ask them what their name is. They get a random partner who's like, oh my God, I have to go with the new white belt. Oh. And then you get 30 minutes of technique and you go right into positionals where you're like, wait, what the heck am I doing? And then you start rolling. Where you lack in technique, you make up for with strength. Because you don't know what you're doing. Yes, your fight or flight kicks in. You don't know what you're doing. And even if you're told, like, hey, this is going to happen, it happens anyway. So you need constant reminders, again, like a kid, to calm down, to slow down, to take a breath, because that's how our biology is. Like we have those instincts. We fight, flee, we freeze. And so if we don't know how to respond, our bodies kind of freak out. We go into that, oh my gosh, I'm about to get hurt. I have to save myself. Because in those moments, we think about winning the position or winning the round instead of thinking about it as a learning opportunity. And so imagine that brand new beginner on day 1 gets told, okay, this is what rolling is. This is how we roll. If we go too hard, here's why it's not a good thing. Here's why it's not productive. We have dials. We have 0, we have 100, and we learn at every dial in between. And we want to match our partner. And so my running theme is, if you don't trust your partner, don't roll with them. If I don't trust you to keep me safe, we are not going to go together today. It's not going to happen. I've turned down roles before in my own gym. And when I'm not injured, if there's the 220-pound white belt that wants to go with me, I'll say 10%. And as soon as we shake hands and they get really tense, hey, take a breath. I want you to go lighter. Do you feel how tense you are? Because they don't know that it's happening. So imagine if they actually get corrected in the middle of the round on their intensity and their technique instead of, oh, you're going to go hard with me? Fine. I'm going to go hard back. That's ego. That's fight. And so if we start here, if my intensity is here and you ramp up to here, instead of bringing it back down to here, I match that intensity, but I'm more technical. So then you get frustrated. So you go harder. So I match that. You go harder and I match that. And now we're fighting. And that's where blows come on the mats or, the resentment bills or, man, I hate going with Jimmy over there or, man, Steve right there. Steve is a terrible partner. He always hurts me. I hate going with him.
I'm a lunatic.
Instead of,
True.
right? Yeah. Instead of like, hey, you know what, Steve, every time you roll, I feel like I get hurt. Do you think that we can go lighter? Like that direct communication, people can't do. Like, I feel like most people are inherently avoidant. It comes from whatever childhood trauma that they have, because everybody has something. And I think when they decide to face what they're doing, face that avoidance, and actually start to lead with, I think the phrasing is being conflict intimate. Now we're building better students, better people, and better jiu-jitsu, and the culture is better. Now we're actually leading from the front and building a team that actually wants to train together, in which case we're now also building a team where people that don't belong have a home. Because most people, when they get tossed into that environment, they will quit. I've heard so many guys say, oh, well, women, like, it seems like they just don't like it so that they don't sign up. It's not that they don't like it. Most women have some sort of trauma coming in. And so when somebody's on top of them, smothering them, they're going to panic. It's not built into our systems to start roughhousing on day one. And so we need to be handheld and be like, hey, this is what you're doing. It's okay to feel frustrated. It's okay to feel safe. You'll be okay. And most gym owners and most coaches don't know how to people and read why somebody's having a hard time and why they're getting frustrated.
I love that you brought that up, because often when we talk about speaking up in the gym, people think that this is all about like the really heavy stuff, like, criminal activity. And often it is, right? That's a big part of it. But it's also an important thing for the smaller things, the softer things, just about building a culture. I've said many times that, God, when you go onto Reddit and you look at the kind of problems that people report, 99% of them could be resolved by just talking to the other person. For some reason in jiu-jitsu, we don't really do that. And it should be more okay to do that. I remember when I started jiu-jitsu, I was a completely untrained idiot white belt. And one of my regular training partners, I won't dox her here, but she was a woman who was also another white belt, and she was much smaller than me, but a little bit more experienced. She had a few stripes on her white belt. And when you're a white belt, if there's another white belt with like 2 stripes on their white, they might as well be a black belt. They're like a completely different level above you at this point. And I remember I was rolling with her and I felt like I was going fine, but I didn't know how to do martial arts. I was probably way too intense. And she, told me, like, breathe a bit more, calm down, be more relaxed. And it's not just that she said that, it's that she said that with this like degree of kindness and friendliness that's kind of hard to put into words. Like, she wasn't mad at me. She was very much trying to help me. And that approach really stuck with me. And she was absolutely right. And to this day now, I'm often on the other side of the equation. And to your point, Sonia, some of the best advice that I often give to beginners is you can't always tell when you're early on, you can't always tell if you're being too tense or too aggressive, or if you're breathing too hard, because when you're in the throes of that fight or flight response, that acute stress response, it's hard to think rationally. You can condition that out over time, but it can take years of training. When you're a beginner, the best thing is if you have a partner who can just tell you. Because if I'm rolling with you, if you're breathing too hard and you're too tense, I can feel it. And if I tell you, after a few times of telling you, you're going to learn to regulate your energy. And that's not to even say that we're criticizing people and we're saying you're being way too tough, you're being too tense. No, it's just that part of good jiu-jitsu is regulating your energy and your effort. And the tenser you are, the easier, and this is just life advice, right? The tenser you are, the easier it is for other people to manipulate you, both physically and emotionally and mentally as well. So in jiu-jitsu, we often tell people to kind of be loose, right? Be relaxed until it's time to strike. Then you go for it. If you're tense all the time, then any sort of arm drag or off balance is going to work way better against you, because you're a rigid structure. And that's hard to train yourself out of. So if you can create a culture where people, not in a critical sense, but just friendly, like, hey, loosen up, we should loosen up a bit. Like, I noticed you're being a bit too tense, loosen up a little bit here. That goes a long way, not just towards a better culture, but honestly towards better jiu-jitsu for the people involved.
I have had moments where I've made students sing while they roll because if you're singing, you can't go hard. I had
That's
a
awesome.
I'll call out Maddie if she ever watches this. She requested The Lion King, and she's belting it out, and I swear it was the flowiest I've ever seen her move, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, it drives visitors and other people crazy. But we encourage tons of conversation. I mean, just bullshit conversation while people are rolling and training for that very reason. Because if you're telling me about what you had for lunch, you're not trying to, kill somebody.
Exactly.
Besides, if you can't roll when someone's talking to you, then you're not a good grappler. Like, you got to be able to survive some degree of distraction. All of these people are like, we must roll in science because this is serious. Look, if you're telling me that your jiu-jitsu falls apart if someone's talking to you, then you're not very good at jiu-jitsu. You got to be able to stay composed. So I am a big believer in conversation on the mats, right? Ultimately, these are
for the silent streets, brah.
And it's funny, and because I know Jesse and Sonia, you probably will be able to back this up to some degree, but one common self-defense tactic that I hear to defuse a situation is if you keep talking to the person and saying unpredictable, weird things, it can really screw them up if they're trying to attack you because they're in like, the context is like, I'm in violence mode. And if the other person starts asking you weird things, it can really throw you off and defuse the situation. So I think that conversation is an underrated part of jiu-jitsu, right? At the end of the day, we got to be able to do more than just roll once and survive. Theoretically, these people are our friends and we're going to be training with them for decades to come. So we've got to be able to get on the same page. And like, if I got a bad shoulder or a bad knee, we've got to be able to talk about that. And if you're going more intense than I'm comfortable with, we got to be able to talk about that. Like, this shouldn't be a big problem. It shouldn't be taken as some sort of watering down of the sport. It's just part of being a good training partner.
So we've been talking about lateral conversations where I'm training with you, Steve, and I've been coached by Sonia to hey, let's go lighter. You're holding your breath, whatever. But I think it's a very different situation when you're a student and you see the coach is doing terrible things. So when we talk about speaking up, speaking truth to power is very, very different from speaking truth to somebody new at the gym. Hey, around here, here's the culture. It's a very, very different situation. Like, you're not going to go to the instructor of the school and say, I don't like the way that you addressed that child. I thought you were bullying that child. That's just never going to happen. And it creates this conspiracy of silence in which the instructor never really sees any consequences. There may be consequences to his or her actions. People leave the school, but they don't even find out that that's why the person left the school. So they're kept in their insulated little bubble, being able to be an asshole to all and sundry.
Yeah, that's the part that we got to get to, right? So what do you do when that happens? Like when you see, I mean, heck, maybe, oh no, I can't tell you guys how many coaches I saw in Vegas that were berating their kids for their performance, even parents, right? Because parents follow the coach's lead if it's a team sport, oftentimes, because that's what they think is right. They don't know what is right. They follow the coach. So how do you stand up for that coach when they're being a total asshole?
Yeah.
And
I've got an interesting and it's probably topical. I think I posted a screenshot of it in a group chat a few days ago, but I have a former student who just moved to Florida and is looking for a new gym. She is on gym number 3 and she was feeling real good about things. And she was sitting there, I guess they were in some sort of class, and she's a Muslim woman, and there's apparently another Muslim student there that was not there that night, and overheard other students referring to him as the terrorist. And she's immediately like, reaching over to somebody else like, hey, is that what you all just call him when, do y'all call that in front of him? And they're like, no. And she's just like, I'm just, sitting here in my brownness, not understanding what the fuck I'm listening to. So she texted me and we're talking about it. And she's like, well, I guess, location number 4, I got to go find another place. And I'm like, well, hey, things were vibing, right? You were feeling good about this gym. I have to tell you, I can't tell you what to do, but I would really appreciate if you had come to me and told me that was going on in my gym. You may not get that response from them, but I think you owe it to them and to yourself to say something. But it's just that hard, right? It's like sometimes it's just not worth the trouble.
It's not comfortable and people would rather avoid and leave. It's why people cause drama to end relationships because they can't directly tell you, hey, you know what? Like, this isn't working. I'm having a hard time with this. Here's what's happening. Like, any dynamic can work if both people are willing to put the work in. And oftentimes, coaches have that ego complex where it's my way or the highway. They don't know how to people. And here's the thing: jujitsu is a skill, but running a gym is not in the same way. It's not a technical thing. Running a gym is about peopling. How do you people well? How do you connect with people, right? Like, how do you build a culture of respect? So everything we do is not right or wrong. Is this behavior respectful,
Yeah.
right? And so if something isn't respectful, I do expect my students to come tell me or talk to me or talk to each other about that behavior. Um, we had a woman who was partnered up with a kid. I say kid because they're 11. They're non-binary. Um, and this woman had a really hard time because the kid's BO was gnarly. I mean, again, they're going through puberty. It happens, and they just go really hard. But that kid doesn't know any better because they're coming into their kind of like biological strength. They're getting stronger. And instead of directly addressing the kid or talking to the coach in person saying, hey, I'm having a hard time, we get this email, which just feels like resentment's built up. And it's just, man, this happens. No, it stinks and da da da. It's just berating this kid for being a little asshole. And they're not. They're fantastic. And so we could have been like, oh, okay, we'll just not partner you up with them. But instead, we respond, hey, I hear where you're coming from. Reminder, your teammate's a person. We highly encourage addressing them directly. We're happy to help facilitate a conversation. You're welcome to say no with partnering or tell them, hey, they're going too hard, and we're happy to step in as you need to. Like, we're here to facilitate. We're not here to do things for you. And so it reminds them to, hey, let's be respectful. We're not going to call our teammates names. We're not going to be mean. We're going to do things with consideration. And so it's that leadership that tends to be lacking because, again, nobody wants to stir the pot. Maybe you have that trans athlete that joined and people are talking trash because they're competing in competitions that are open gender. And maybe they're male to female trans going up against another biological female, and you're talking shit because they're winning based on pure strength. And the coach hears it and the coach joins in because they're buddy-buddy with the team, instead of standing up for that one athlete. Because again, following is easier than leading. It's much easier to give in to peer pressure than to stand up for somebody else. It's the bystander effect as well, right? Like, you also assume somebody else will take care of it.
Yeah, I think it's especially hard in jiu-jitsu too, of all things, because in a corporate job, for example, if something goes wrong, I mean, I'm not going to say that HR is always trustworthy, and I'm not going to say that companies always do the best for their people. But at the end of the day, there is a recourse, right? If you suffer some sort of abuse at a workplace, there is a process to go through to get a remedy, and it will probably, hopefully, be taken seriously. But even then, it's a very scary thing to speak up, because even with all of those systems in place, even if the law technically is supposed to be protecting you, the fear of reprisal and consequences are so great that many people simply will not speak up, right, when something bad happens. In jiu-jitsu, that's made even worse, because on top of all of that, you also have the fact that we are fighting each other with our hands, right? People always have to be afraid. If I speak up about something, what if someone takes liberties with me and punishes me for speaking up? I mean, I won't name names, but I have heard stories of people who have told me or claimed that this has happened to them, where speaking up was met with aggression and consequence. And it's even harder in jiu-jitsu because, unlike working for some big, massive mega corporation, most of these gyms fly under the radar. It's probably not going to be a huge target of a lawsuit if something goes wrong. A lot of the grossness of jiu-jitsu happens and occurs because it's such a small, insignificant sport in the grand scheme of things. There's so little money, so little interest there at the end of the day, that it's easy for a lot of really awful people to get away with ongoing awful behavior and have it escaped unnoticed for a very, very long time. And I think that fact that we also have this aspect of physical violence makes it even harder for people to speak up, which is why it's even more important for coaches and leaders to make that part of the culture where we make it okay. And we celebrate when people do that, right? You guys brought up a great point about how sometimes, maybe action will be taken behind the scenes, but you might not ever really know that that happened. If someone does something bad, they might be silently removed. That's a step forward, but to really demonstrate to people that you care, you have to show them and you have to explain to them that action was taken, right? Silent action is not good enough. If you really want to show people that you care about doing the right thing, you have to be vocal about it as well. And when the code of conduct gets enforced, you have to explain it. That's part of the reason why, I know he's loath to take credit for this, but it's part of the reason why Craig Jones removing J-Rod from his gym was such a remarkable thing. It shouldn't be remarkable, but it is very unusual that they got ahead of this and they actually just straight up said, here's what happened, here's what we did, right? That should be the standard. It shouldn't be remarkable that happened, but unfortunately in this sport, it kind of is, right? Because so few gyms will do that.
So this like a few months ago, I had a parent come and picket outside my gym. So
Picket?
picket,
This is
picket
exciting.
fence, picket line. Single parents, one parent with 2 or 3 signs, and it was the most ridiculous thing I've seen in a while. I had a teenage kid who had texted me that they were concerned for their physical safety. I tried to get more information. I couldn't get a hold of them. I called the police, right? And CPS got involved. And I heard other stories from other coaches that shared stuff with me that was really concerning and alarming. And so I called CPS personally as well. And instead of talking to me about what was going on and wondering why their kid felt that way and taking care of their kid, he is trying to coerce me to give him the text message exchange between me and his kiddo because they deleted it from their phone. And he thinks that he has a legal right to these texts. So he calls the police on me in my own gym. And then tries it again. And it comes back the next day with picket signs saying that coach thinks that keeping texts a secret with a minor is okay. Which is insinuating many things.
That is a deliberate smear, right? Or at least it sounds that way.
It was borderline slanderous, and I did try to get a protective order, but he had stopped at the time, and so the judge was like, if it happens again, then we'll grant it. But I sent an email to my team as soon as it happened saying, hey, you might see this person outside. There was an incident where we were concerned for a kid's safety, and the parents tried to access records, and we're respecting the privacy of the kid because they're old enough to be able to have privacy. If the kid gave me consent and permission, I'd be happy to share. But the parent had the kid text me from their phone to say, hey, it's okay. You can totally give it to my mom and dad. It's a whole thing. But I feel like most people in that instance wouldn't have asked the right questions and called the cops. They would have let it slide. And then, oh, well, it's out of my hands now. They wouldn't have called CPS a couple of times to make sure that things were okay. They wouldn't have tried to help the kid because there's nobody else to advocate for the kid. Like, who else is going to do it? Like, who else is going to stand up for the people that need the help? That was it. Like, if you don't stand up for that person that needs your help, why would you assume somebody else will? Because they're all thinking exactly what you're thinking, that somebody else will take care of that.
Yeah, I think that something that I'm increasingly starting to feel these days is that we need to really be aggressive about not letting bad behavior be normalized, right? I mean, often, as you mentioned, when something bad happens, people's, especially the leader, their natural inclination might be, well, I'll just let this blow over, or I won't make a big deal out of it because it'll probably resolve itself. If you do that, what you're doing is you're giving implicit and tacit endorsement that this is okay and is acceptable, right? And maybe that wasn't your intent. It probably wasn't your intent, but when you let something slide a little bit, just because you don't want to have the difficult conversation to confront someone about that, then you're giving them implicit permission to continue. And that means that the next time they can push the envelope just one step further. And I mean, if you need any further evidence of this being a problem, I would cite the last 10 years of world history, right? I mean, if you let something happen and you don't immediately nip it in the bud, then those people will take one step further. And that's part of the reason why, when you listen to people who have experience dealing with hate groups, part of what they say is like, you have to have zero tolerance for these people, because as soon as you give them any degree of legitimacy, or as soon as you let them have a seat at the table and you don't punish them or remove them immediately, you're giving them tacit permission to do what they're doing. And that means that now the window of acceptable behavior has moved one notch toward them. And then it becomes harder the next time. And if they take the next step, it's going to be harder for you to stand up, because you've already set the precedent that you're just going to ignore stuff, right? If you ignored something the first time, odds are you're going to ignore it the second time as well, because you've established the precedent that this is what you do. And it takes a lot of courage for a gym owner to speak up about this stuff. And I can give an example. Friend of mine who I hope we can get on the podcast here, Josh Wentworth, has talked about this a lot. He has a policy of zero politics talk in his gym. And if he hears two people talking about politics, even if it's in good faith, he will immediately stop them and say, if you're going to have this chat, you have to leave. You have to go do it somewhere else, right? I can't control what you're going to do outside of here, but in this gym, we don't talk about politics. And I challenged him on that. I said, I think that, that seems excessive, right? If people are talking in good faith, what's the difference? And part of what he said is as soon as you start to, you have to remember that in this sport, we trust people with our bodies, right? When I roll with you implicitly, I am trusting you with my body. And any kind of outside discussion like that can turn into something really heated, it has the potential to snowball into a bigger problem that eventually could do real harm. And maybe for step one, it's not that big a deal, right? But if you let that normalize, eventually you're going to have that situation where two people get into a screaming match and then it materializes mid-roll and someone gets hurt, right? And why not just cut all of that off at the pass and not allow that in the gym? But you can only do that if you take a step and you take a stand at the first time that happens, right? As soon as you allow something to normalize, then it becomes even harder to do something about it the next time, because people will expect now, well, you let this happen last time. Isn't this okay? Right? So you got to put a stop to this stuff right away.
I feel like whether you're a coach, gym owner, or student, I believe in the concept of, if you don't like something, if it doesn't sit with you, you have to do something about it. Because either you can complain, like maybe you go home and complain to your other half or your friends, oh man, this happened today at Jiu-Jitsu, and oh, it was so annoying. They just kept talking about this and kept talking trash about so-and-so, and oh my God, it's so stupid. You can complain about it, or you can do something about it, right? Because change doesn't happen unless somebody does something, and that is gonna stir the pot, that it's gonna be drama, but it has to happen to make a difference. So what should you do if maybe you are hanging out after class and there's a bunch of people talking about, um, oh yeah, man, so and so, I would totally hook up with them. How would you handle that if you heard that? What should you do if you're a student?
Is that a rhetorical? Because I can definitely answer.
I want to hear. I have thoughts, but I want to hear everybody else's thoughts. How would you handle that?
So my thought is, you would just right out of the gate, you have to tell them, and you have to tell them in the context of that conversation that we don't talk about that here. And if need be, you can explain why. What many coaches would do is they would try to kind of handle that privately, which is, okay, I'll put a pause on this, but maybe next time I get this person one-on-one, I'll tell them not to do it. That's not really sufficient for something like this. I understand. And again, we're getting into cultural background, Sonia. This is something that I think a lot of people don't understand. I've been talking about this a lot, and I'm actually thinking about making a course on this. As an Asian Canadian, a big part of my cultural conditioning has been I don't want to say conflict avoidance, but having a Chinese background, we're often encouraged to prioritize communal well-being. And I remember hearing stories and fables when I was a kid that really emphasized the message that, like, it's all about helping people save face and helping people look good because the health of the group is. And look, there's value to that approach. I'm not criticizing it that much, but for some things, you need to nip it in the bud right then and there, because it's not just about stopping that person from doing it. It's about sending the signal to everyone else that you will be the person who does this and that this will happen, right? I mean, if I was in the locker room with someone and they made a comment like that, and I say nothing, but I tell the coach, and then like 2 weeks later, the coach tells the person and they stop. Okay, that's good, I guess. But the problem is, first of all, there's no immediacy anymore, right? Remedies usually work better if they're immediate. If you tell someone right away what the problem was, that's going to work better than if you hold off late until later. But also, it's not just about getting that person to stop. It's about everyone in the room who heard the person say that, right? Once one person starts talking about sexualizing other training partners, they're now setting the standard that this is something that everyone can do. And if you go and you punish that silently or reprimand the person silently, the rest of the people in the room don't know that that happened. They don't know that the disrespect to the woman was addressed. And this is part of the reason why, I mean, God, this is aging me, and I can't believe I have to say this, but back when in the first Trump election, when he admitted on tape that he sexually abuses women and bragged about it, and then he responded by saying this is just locker room talk. That was astounding to me, because if someone said that in any locker room that I'm in, the response would be swift and vicious. Like that is not the conduct of any locker room that I have been in. And frankly, as a man, it is insulting to me that he is trying to normalize that as the behavior of what men do in locker rooms, because that is simply not the case. To me, that was a morbidly offensive statement, and it would be the same if a friend of mine was sexualized in a training room or in a locker in the gym. So I think that, and this is where, Jesse, to your point, culture guardianship matters, right? Because you as the head coach can't always be everywhere at once. So a big part of coaching is, how do you take your lieutenants and the other senior people and condition them so that if they see this, they step in and say, hey, we don't do that here. Like, you can't talk about whoever that way. That's not cool, right? You kill it right on the spot. If you don't do that, you let it metastasize, and then it quickly grows out of your control. But back to you guys. I mean, I'm not a gym owner. I'm just a jiu-jitsu fake guy. So Sonia and Jesse, I'd love to know what you think about this.
Yeah, I mean, I am very blessed in that. I mean, there was a lot of work up front, but to your point, I mean, it happens. It maybe not that egregious, but people get checked and corrected at our place all the time, and it is rarely by me because I'm not everywhere all at once. And part of that is empowering the other community members at the school, right? I may be paying the rent, but this is a community that everybody is part of. And if you let these folks and encourage these folks to have some buy-in in this community, they will help you protect it. But I mean, I do think that's something that explicitly has to be said. Like, just like you green light the mat enforcer, I green light our cultural enforcers. Like, yeah, if you see this shit, end it. And if you need help, I'll end it. But you can at least get it started, and it seems to work pretty damn well most of the time.
I think
Mhm.
it's like, I think there have been cases of HR in corporate settings going too far. We all have examples of that. And certainly I could name a number of examples. But the difference, and also I think we have to be realistic that there will be, in a in a large group of people, there will be sexual attraction between people, and it will be talked about. That being said, there's a degree of appropriateness for every workplace. I would argue that in a jiu-jitsu context, it's the maximum degree of, it's the minimum amount of acceptability there, just because of the nature of the sport. if I maybe am talking with a friend at the accountant's office that I think so and so is really attractive, that may or may not be appropriate. I would argue it is. HR would probably tell me it isn't. But in a jiu-jitsu context, when you're both going to be rolling with that person in the most intimate way possible, that's one step short, that's a couple sheets of rash guard and gi cloth away from sex. The tolerance has to be 0. So,
To me, that boils down to respecting your training partners, because that's not just a woman to sexualize, it's a training partner who's there to help you learn too, right? And so again, everything always boils down to being respectful. And back to the original question, to me, it's like when a kid does something wrong, do we wait 2 weeks to tell them? Do we ignore it? Because otherwise it enables that behavior. So part of it, like the addressing it in the moment, has to happen. But what if you're the student and you can't address it because the coach is the one doing that? Like, I've been in environments where, because you have that power imbalance, it's coach and student. I've literally been in a space where a coach would sleep with women back to back to back. And over the course of a year, I lost 10 different training partners because of that. So at that point, what do you do? In that time, like, I didn't know what to say. This was, 16 years ago, right? But if that were me now, I would talk to the coach and say, that's not okay. And also be prepared to leave, right? Because a lot of people feel like they can't leave because they're stuck. It's loyalty. They're bound to that group. It's their family. You can't leave family. But at the same time, if that family isn't being respectful, if they're not taking care of you the way that they should, if, like, is that the place that you want your kids to train if you see the coach sleep with all the women, right? Like, is that a place you'd want your sister at or your mom at if you know that that was happening? Like, how would you handle that? Like, what if you got your sister to train and the coach was trying to hook up with her? What would you do?
I mean, at this point,
Yep.
honestly, I don't think I would, and I hate to say this, but at this point, I would be very hesitant to recommend to the women in my life that they train jujitsu. I hate to say it, but it's true, right? I mean, it's just, unless I know exactly where they're training and I can vouch for the instructor, it's just too much of a mixed bag. You never know what's going to happen, and the consequences to getting it wrong are huge. And there are way too many dirt bags in the sport, and that doesn't even just come down to the obvious things of sexual abuse. I'm also talking about grievous injury, just people who are. I mean, God, we've done how many episodes on active clubs? I don't want to send someone to one of those, right? So at this point, it's getting progressively harder and harder to just give that green light rubber stamp of like jiu-jitsu changed my life. Everyone should sign up. I try to give a much more nuanced approach to it now and say, look, it's a sport. I love it. A lot of people love it. A lot of people get value out of it, but I got to be honest. There's a lot of downsides, and there's a lot of reasons why, especially if you're a woman, you should be very careful getting into an activity like this. And it shouldn't be like that. But again, if it were my, like my niece or my nephew or someone in my family who wanted me to recommend jujitsu to them, I would be very careful. In fact, I've had at least one experience where a good friend of mine told me, like, Steve, I was inspired by your jujitsu journey. I've put my kid into jujitsu, and I'm starting jujitsu, and I'm so excited about this. And I told him, oh, cool. Where do you train? And he told me. And I said, well, the first thing you should know is that instructor has been repeatedly accused of multiple crimes, right? The person you're training under has been accused of sexual abuse, criminal violence, and a variety of other things. So look, I am glad that you want to try something new and go outside of your comfort zone, but there are problems with the sport that we have not yet resolved. And
it
that
sucks, right? Because, we've had to kind of create a underground network. I mean, most of the women that train with us know, like when they're traveling, that it's probably not a bad idea to check in with me to be like, I'm headed to this town. Is there anything safe there? And sometimes I know, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I've got friends close enough that I can, but like, what a shitty system that we're living in.
There's actually a network on Facebook that you can drop, hey, I'm visiting this town. Where should I train? And it's a women's only group. So they'll drop in like, hey, this is safe. I'm here. Come train with me here. And I believe there's actually a list somewhere put together of verified gyms that are female friendly and safe. So, and it's again on the back end for like women, like we've had to create these systems and resources to be able to train safely because it's
The fact that
It's a
we have to
minefield.
have an underground railroad for women to train in jiu-jitsu, like that should be extremely concerning to everyone. And I also want to emphasize this too, because sometimes when we talk about this topic, people say, like, why are you, this doesn't apply to me. I'm a bro, right? Well, look, if you've ever trained with one of these, like these guys that we're talking about here, it's not just the women who suffer training with them. I mean, I have trained with guys that would kind of fall into this problem demographic, and ultimately in very different ways their male training partners wind up getting hurt as well, right? Because if you're if you're shitty to your female training partners, there's a non-zero chance you're going to be shitty to your male training partners as well.
I'm gonna share a story. So I've been training for 16 years. I was a 4-stripe blue belt when I opened up my gym, and we were originally 6 total partners until I was the last one standing. And the main other partner was my then boyfriend. And he wasn't the nicest person. The relationship was abusive emotionally and towards the end physically. And he ended up sleeping with a student, breaking up with me, and then kept trying to date her while she also trained, and we ran the gym together. And
Well, that's fucked
the,
up.
this is the PG version of the story. this is the PG version of the story. And it was the point where all of that drama was kind of front facing because it was hard to keep it out. Like I felt like I was crazy. I was gaslit. I felt like I was insane. He was the head coach. I was the kids coach. And it felt like nobody believed me. And here's the thing, people who are victims of abuse, they don't speak up. They feel like nobody will believe them. They've been convinced that they're crazy in the first place, that it's all their fault. Like I felt like everything was my fault. And so I was like, yeah, fine, sure, you can date her while we do this together. And then I put a boundary down because the business was suffering, the classes were suffering, he was coming in late, and it just wasn't working. I'm like, hey, you can't date her and do this. And it blew up in my face, and it was ugly. He ended up ghosting the business and opening up another gym under the same team 15 minutes away. And all of my students, because again, I'm a 4-stripe blue belt, they're like, oh, we can go train there too? Great. I had somebody who paid a legacy membership, a lifetime, who had a lawyer saying that they wanted me to pay them back because they're going to the other gym. I didn't have any money. I had a payment plan of like $700 for 12 months at a time where I had no money because otherwise I would have been sued. And it's all because, again, I'm the female over here, like screw me. And so once he opened up the gym under the other team, I'd called the owner and the VP, and they were like, it's just business. Figure it out. But they knew that there was infidelity involved, that there was some abuse involved. Like they were aware of it. But they're like, nope, it's not my problem. It's business. You two figure it out. You two figure out how to get along. So instead of dealing with it and sucking it up, I left. I joined another team that was local, and I thought it was a great fit. There was a female head coach. There was another second partner who was a blue belt male. But then I got pulled into this culture of like the purple belt shouldn't tell the black belt what to do. And I'm sitting here like, but this is my business. What do you mean? They wanted to put in a Brazilian black belt who had zero experience with kids, teaching my kids classes, who couldn't speak English. And at this time, I'd been coaching kids, since I was 14. And so I'd been coaching kids for like 15, 16 years at this point. Like it was my life. And they're telling me to give my kids classes because for optics, it's a black belt. That wasn't okay. So they had another head coach come on. He literally told me a purple belt shouldn't tell a black belt what to do. but he was only around for six hours out of the month. And so I was left to figure things out for myself. So I left that, and then I had another professor come on board under a different affiliation. And it worked for a while. He was the very go hard, die hard, old school, like, yeah, let's tough it out. People got ranked based on how tough they were versus how technical they were. Because when he left, I had 4-stripe blue belts that didn't have a guard game, that didn't know how to like play open guard whatsoever, who couldn't get on their hips and actually shrimp out, and who rolled like a full on flailing, just like menace. It was insane. And so I had to retrain that culture. And that professor, when I was 9 months pregnant, a week before my due date, threw a tantrum about COVID and social distancing and said that we were doing watered down jiu-jitsu and that it was subpar. And he left and took a bunch of students to open up a gym elsewhere a week before I gave birth. So since then, because again, I always make changes that fit the better of the business, right? Like what is good for my team, and secondary, what is good for me as a person. And so since then, I've been unaffiliated, but I've also gone through more changes of coaches and business and people. And the hardest part has always been communicating with the team and getting everybody on the same page. And it's not a one-off thing. It's work that is done for a lifetime. Like you never stop correcting and fixing and adjusting because culture always changes. I was gone for a few months. Like it was, I wasn't coaching as consistently. And when I came back, the culture shifted. And so we had to reset the culture. And so I think it's something that people don't think about. Like when shit hits the fan, you have to make the changes. Like change is the only constant in life. So again, that's the like PG summary of what's been going on. But that's been like the last 13 years of my life.
One last thing I want to ask you, and this touches on this, and you said this word a few times. It is a word that often gets thrown around, and but it's an important word, and that word is gaslighting. And for those who don't know the term, I mean, this is one of those terms that runs the risk of having been thrown around so much that it may have actually kind of lost its meaning. So I think it makes sense to back up and clarify. Gaslighting is basically when you are the subject of some sort of negative behavior and the perpetrator try to spin it so that the problem is all about you. It actually stems from the term stems from an old movie back in, I think, like the 1930s, I want to say, where someone tried to like convince this woman that she was crazy. Anyway, that's where the name comes from. But it comes up a lot when we talk about things like abuse and the martial arts. And you touched on this a few times. So I'd love to hear maybe your side of the story and what you've experienced here, because the experience that I have seen is whenever we talk about these kinds of negative problems in jiu-jitsu, or whenever we give someone a platform to share their story, there will always be people who pop out of the woodwork and try to spin it to make the victim sound like the perpetrator. I've had this happen many times where, people will come and they'll tell some horror story about jiu-jitsu, and there will be someone in the comments who will say, well, it was actually their fault. It wasn't the instructor. It was clearly them. What were their motives? Were they a bad person? Are we sure they didn't want this? Right. And I see this a lot, especially when women speak out about negative experiences in society at large. But of course, jiu-jitsu is our relevant slice of this, where they will share their story and someone will immediately crawl out of the woodwork and say, well, how do we know that she didn't want this or didn't deserve this? Or how do we know she's just not crazy? Which is my favorite excuse is, oh, she's just crazy. She's a lunatic hormonal female who, does completely irrational things like, publicly tank her reputation for no reason. This I hear all the time. And every time something bad happens in jiu-jitsu and an instructor is rightfully dragged through the mud for what they did, there will be fans of that person who pop up and attack the accuser. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because this is one of the hardest parts of speaking up, is being the victim and the recipient of that kind of abuse.
So with my ex, I once remember a time I was driving and we got into a fight. We're coming back from Portland and I got punched in the face 3 times over the course of like 10 minutes. I pull over. It's a whole mess. And later we're talking about it. Well, I wouldn't have gotten so mad if you didn't provoke me. It was my fault I got punched in the face. It's because I got upset and I was mad and I was angry. So it's my fault he got angry. Right? So there's ways of like, oh, that never happened, like you made it up. Right? Like maybe your coach is watching a roll and your training partner grabbed your boob. You're like, hey, this happened. Why'd you do that? And the guy's like, oh, I never did that. You're making it up. And the coach's like, nope, I didn't see it. I feel like I'm crazy because I know that happened to me. I know that that was my experience, but everybody else around me is telling me like, no, that never happened. What are you talking about? You're insane. Or the common one, because you get gaslit so much, you think that you're the problem and that the behavior is normal. You think that this terrible, terrible, terrible behavior should be happening. Like maybe somebody's cracking a joke, like Jesse's student that heard the terrorist joke, right? Like maybe somebody's like, oh, you're overreacting. It's just a joke. Now you think, oh, maybe I did overreact. Like you question your experience because everybody else is making you feel like you're insane. Like you question your own sanity. And oftentimes, like when you hear like, oh, it's all in your head, like you're being paranoid, you're crazy, you question yourself, like, am I crazy? Like, is it my fault? And most women already come in with trauma that they don't even know they have, right? Like the sexual assaults is reported to be what 1 out of every 4 women. That number is higher. I did a self-defense workshop and we were having a really good conversation. And I asked the group, I was like, and you don't have to answer, raise your hand if you've ever experienced any form of sexual assault, whether somebody groped you, grabbed you, or full on like assault. Half the room raised their hand. Only 1 person reported it because nobody believes women except for other women. And even then, other women are also like, no, you're crazy. Like that, he would never do that to you. That would never happen. Why would he ever do that? Right? Maybe, again, you're groomed. The coach is giving you compliments. Maybe like they offer you private lessons because like they see the potential in you. And then maybe they start doing things or saying stuff and you're like, hey, I don't like that. Please don't do that. Oh, you're just being sensitive. Like they shift the blame, right? Like or even like they'll lie like, no, like I never said that. I never did that. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm only here to help you. Like, why would I ever do that? I just think you're awesome at Jiu-Jitsu. Right? Like when you have teenagers, like when you put your teenagers into a program, I don't care what program it is, like they have to understand, hey, here are the things that might happen. Here are the things to look out for. And if I'm your parent, I want you to come talk to me because I want to make sure your experiences are validated and that we're on the same page. Right? And again, that's a whole it's a whole long ramble of just, if you feel crazy, you're probably not crazy. You're probably right. And if you feel crazy, you got to do something about it because you're not the only person experiencing what you're experiencing.
Yeah. And if you stay silent, let's say you get through it, that doesn't protect the people who come after you. I know people who, several women who've convinced themselves that getting groomed in their teens, that, oh, that was just that teacher, that was just that person in authority. He just made a mistake. You know, they shut it down and then found out 10 years later, no, he just went on to the next person and the next person, the next person. So you're not only protecting yourself, you're protecting the people behind you.
There's somebody local to Washington when I was brand new to Jiu-Jitsu, like she was a competition phenom. She was a kid and she beat the crap out of me. She was so good. And it was always her and the professor. And that's kind of weird, but I mean, I guess like that's just the relationship they have. And not too long ago, like she came public with her story that she was groomed, that they had a relationship, and that she didn't want it. Like she thought she did, but again, she was a teenager, she was a kid, and that he did the same thing with a couple other girls after her. And at the time, like, I was like, this is kind of weird, but I mean, I guess it's normal. Like, I didn't think anything of it, you know? I was in my early 20s. Like, I was still a very naive, innocent, not experienced individual in the dynamics of life and politics of jiu-jitsu. So,
It is crazy how quickly we can all of us, right, fall into that trap of, well, maybe this is normal. Maybe I should just not say something. I myself have fallen into this, and it's incredible because I've seen people who are outside of jiu-jitsu. They're unbelievably successful in life. CEOs making like tens of millions of dollars a year, but they throw on that white belt and suddenly they are willing to be completely subordinate to some other person just because they're a black belt. And they don't feel comfortable speaking up about things. There's very powerful aspects of human psychology that make it hard for people to speak up in these situations. And our ability to convince ourselves that stuff is normal is really quite wild. I mean, I remember seeing stuff early in my jiu-jitsu journey, and it wasn't until well after the fact that I realized that this is actually really fucked up behavior. Like this was not normal. But at the time, as a white belt, a blue belt even, I didn't feel like I was in a position to speak out about this because who am I? I don't know what's normal. I don't know what's not. I mean, who am I to comment on the culture of jiu-jitsu as someone who just started this? I don't have enough visibility into the matter to know if this is actually a crime or not. So, why would my opinion matter? But in retrospect, with the benefit of experience and hindsight, a lot of the stuff that I've seen in the sport was really disappointing and gross. Um, and this is a huge criticism that often comes up when women speak out. People often say, well, why didn't they speak out earlier? Why did they wait 3 to 6 months? Doesn't that mean they wanted it and it was consensual and now they're coming after his jiu-jitsu gym dollars or something? It's like, look, people really need to understand how to put themselves in someone else's perspective. Like the amount of sheer terror that you go through when you experience that kind of trauma, and then you have to decide whether you want to relive it and possibly make it worse by speaking up. People don't understand what that does to you, right? It's easy to just sit there behind a keyboard and say, well, why didn't she bring it up earlier? But if that were you, or if that were your daughter or your wife or your niece or your cousin who was in that situation, you would much better understand why they didn't just speak up the day after, right?
shame, guilt, yeah.
Well, yeah, and just like sometimes internal gaslighting, like trying to figure out what were my motivations. I remember when we did the Zuma episode with Jane Doe, one of the things, Jesse, that your partner Shelby had to say afterwards was to our guest was, look, you keep saying that you're blaming yourself for this, right? And you need to stop saying that because that's not productive. That's a common thing that people in that situation often say is they try to self-rationalize and say, well, was this my fault? No, it absolutely was not your fault if someone else victimized you.
I think that actually boils down to the kind of like lifeism of we don't control other people's actions, we only control our own, right? And that goes both ways. But if you're the observer, you don't control what happens, but you control what you do about it, right? Like, are you doing right by you? Are you doing right by that person? Like, are you treating others with respect? Are you making changes where you can? Are you standing up for other people? Are you being better? Like, black belts in the sport need to do better because it's top down. Like, you lead by example, right? Like, it's different than other sports and arts because we are so intimate. We're so close together. We literally risk ripping limbs and choke people unconscious if we're not being careful and smart about things. Like, we're in such a delicate art that we have to do better because there's Jiu-Jitsu Con Master Worlds had 50 something mats running for 3 days. That is thousands of competitors and tens of thousands of people. That was so many people this last weekend. That's a ton of people flying into one spot to compete. There's so many people that train. There's so many kids coming up in the sport. You have schools like AOJ and Atos. They have homeschool kids that are full-time athletes. Like, what's the example that they're seeing? Are they going to grow up to be amazing people, or are they just going to be the ego-driven competitor? Like, my kids, like, I feel like I can create world champions. Like, I can make them work their asses off if I really want to. But I tell my parents, I care more that your kids are good people and good leaders over good competitors. Being a good competitor comes with time, but being a good person starts now. So my kids that are good, that compete, I have them help me teach. I have them help with kids class. I have them help with leadership options. I partner them with new people because I don't want I don't want to go with so-and-so. They don't know what they're, no, I want you to help that person. I want you to communicate. I want you to do better. And so that's what my kids program, that's what my kids program is about, above being a good competitor, right? That's top down.
Nice. Well, maybe that's
Yeah.
as good a time as any to plug that program, Sonia. If people want to learn more about your gym, or if they want to train with you, or they want to learn more about your work, where can they find you?
I'm Combat Arts Academy in West Seattle. You can find me on Instagram. If you Google us, you can text that number right there. And then you can find me on Instagram. I might respond to messages in like 3 to 18 business days. So it's much better to text the gym than me personally. So
You got it.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Sonia. Any closing thoughts or final wisdom you want to share here before we tie this one up?
I think I kind of got most of my like little wisdom nuggets out there. It was a pleasure hanging out with you guys. Thank you, Steve, Jesse, Stephan. That was a blast.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. I always love having these kinds of conversations. A lot of good information in this one. Thank you so much for sharing, Sonia. I know that these are tough conversations, so I always want to make sure that people know that we appreciate you speaking out about this stuff.
Absolutely. Thanks, Steve.
Awesome. All right. Thanks all. Take care, everyone.
All right.
Thanks to the
you.
listeners, too. Talk to you soon.